You are listening to the Intercoastal Podcast, part of the Destination Marketing Podcast Network. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Intercoastal Podcast, brought to you from Beaufort, South Carolina. Once again, today we have Victoria Smalls on with us, and we're really excited to have her on again. Last episode we had her on, we talked about the Reconstruction era and all of the awesome historical figures that came out of South Carolina and some of the really cool elements that brought on the Reconstruction. So thank you for being with us again, Victoria.
Yay, thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you some more and to really dive in even more into the history and impact and like rich culture that this has brought onto Beaufort. So we're excited to have you. Last time we talked a lot about some of the really cool historical figures like Hastings. Oh, what was his last name? I just forgot it.
Yeah, Hastings Gant.
Thank you, Hastings
Definitely.
Gant. I was like, we just talked about him and I'm already spacing, but
no,
he
it's
was
okay.
really incredible.
Yeah,
And obviously Harriet Tubman, and
Mm.
there's so many cool ones. So this time I think it'd be awesome if we talk about some of the really cool historical locations that are in the area that people can see and learn even more about this.
Yeah, I'm really ready. I'm ready to talk about these sites, and got a lot to cover.
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
Okay, so we talked about how Reconstruction era history is really, in Beaufort is kind of like this epicenter, and we talked about the people, but there are like over 100 historic sites and places and buildings that speak to the Reconstruction era here in Beaufort, in the Beaufort area as well. And I just want to, name a few and really delve in deeply into Penn School. And so I'm going to start with Camp Saxton. Camp Saxton is actually the site that is located currently on the Naval Support Facility here in Port Royal. And it's where the 1st South Carolina Regiment of Volunteers, the first United States Colored Troops, mustered into the United States Army. This is where they're going to be encamped. And this is also where some other USCT soldiers, regiments are going to be encamped. And where the historical ceremony, the Emancipation Proclamation reading, was held on January 1st, 1863. And it was held there to announce and read the proclamation. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people of all races coming to hear this proclamation read. And this proclamation, of course, is going to free all enslaved people in the United States in rebellion against the United States. So this is a very important document, and we're really fortunate that this is going to be one of the official reading places for it. Another place that is really significant, we talked about Robert Smalls in the other segment, and another place that is really important to the history here is the Robert Smalls House, as I call it, but it's really the Henry McKee House here on Prince Street in Beaufort. And it's where Robert Smalls was born and enslaved, and where he purchased and where he resided after the Civil War. So with that money that he was awarded for surrendering the Confederate steamship planner to the Union forces, he was able to buy the house in which he was born and enslaved in. And then also,
Which is absolutely incredible.
it is. It really is to be. I'm trying to think of how many people during this time frame can say that they own the house of the enslavers that enslaved them. And I don't
Yeah.
know many. I don't know a lot, but this is pretty significant. Very significant. And then we also have the First African Baptist Church here in Beaufort, and was built by African American members and also attended by Robert Smalls. So it was built in 1865, and that still remains here. It's still an existing congregation. It still is a house of worship here. We have
That's
also,
amazing.
it is, a lot of places here are still active, whether it's a home that someone privately owns, whether it's a museum space or an interpretation space or an actual church. And I think sometimes we forget how churches play an active and activist role in the emancipation of enslaved people. So these spaces are not only sacred, but also they're active and are activists within the movement. And we also have a building called the Beaufort that was called the Beaufort College, and it was constructed in 1852. And it was used during Reconstruction as a satellite office for the Freedmen's Bureau. And it was also before that a school for Blacks, for African Americans. Today, it's our Beaufort branch of the University of South Carolina. And then we also have a Freedmen's Bureau bank that was here. The Freedmen's Bureau was very important to help safeguard and put in place policies to help the freedmen, integrate into society. So that's going to be helping them with land issues, with acquiring land. That's going to be helping them in refugee situations because we had people that weren't from Beaufort that were coming here because the Union forces were here. They came here to run away from being enslaved where they were to be able to be freed much sooner. And so we had people coming from Edisto Island and the Charleston surrounding areas to come here to experience freedom. And then also we have research that shows that there were enslaved people coming from the northern part of Florida, like the Jacksonville, Florida area, to come to the
Wow.
Beaufort area for freedom. And so the Freedmen's Bureau was put in place to really help really try to firmly establish policies that former Confederates did not want to have established. So there was a Freedmen's Bank. And on Bay Street, that building still stands. It's no longer a bank, it's a store. But the Freedmen's Bank had the intention of helping emancipated people and U.S. colored troops save money. So that's really important. My second great grandparents, Adam and Betsy Smalls, actually have had um, a bank account there, and I have their actual application for the bank. And at the top,
That's
their
so cool.
application, it is so amazing. It's a beautiful document, and it's dated February 9, 1865. I can't remember, or 1860. Oh, I'm seeing a couple of numbers. I cannot remember. I apologize. But on that
It's all
document,
good.
we didn't have photo ID at the time, so that document listed a lot of information: where he lived, where he resided, what was his occupation, who he worked for. And so his occupation was a farmer, and who he worked for, it said himself on his own land. And so this is really important. All the way back in the late 1860s, my family owned land and they had money in the Freedmen's Bank. So this is a very important site. Another important site here is the St. Helena Parish Church, and that was constructed well before the Civil War in 1724. But during the Civil War, it was used as a hospital. And the damage to that hospital was so significant during the Civil War, it took decades for them to fully renovate the building to its current state. You had many churches here. The Baptist Church of Beaufort, built in 1855, and during the Civil War, it was also a hospital. A lot of the churches here served as hospitals because they had that space that was needed to
Hmm.
care for the soldiers that were in battle in different places, and that were brought here to heal, and unfortunately, many of them passing. So before and after the Civil War, the Baptist Church of Beaufort assisted African Americans in having their own places of worship. and we'll talk about one of those, the Brick Baptist Church on St. Helena Island. We also have this place called the Mission, built in 1785. And during Reconstruction, the Mission was used to help further the education of the quote unquote Negro, the African Americans during that time. And it was occupied by Rachel Crane Mather. And she is going to be the founder of the Mather School here in Beaufort, a very important school, very similar to the teachings of Penn School. And then where I am located right now for this podcast, the Arsenal. And this is going to
Right.
be the Beaufort Regional Visitor Center. This place is very important during the Reconstruction era. It was a meeting place for Black Republicans in Beaufort and where the Black National Guard met. It was also used as a storehouse for the Freedmen's Bureau, so supplies for refugees, things like that, things that were needed, whether there were medical supplies or food or clothing. This place is where they housed them. So this place is significant, and I'm so happy to be here in this building today because of that.
No, Rob and I have talked about some of the cool history with the Arsenal, so it's really cool that it connects here too. It's just amazing building.
They used a lot of the spaces here in Beaufort during this time span, and like I said, there are over 100 historic sites just in downtown Beaufort alone that speak to it. And as we uncover more history through research, we find that more and more have to be added to this long list, this beautiful list, actually. Another place is going to be the Tabernacle Baptist Church, built in the 1840s. And by the Beaufort Church for the African Americans to have worship. And in 1863, the congregation separated from the Baptist Church. And the original building was destroyed during the Great Hurricane of 1893, but then was
Oh,
rebuilt. And this is going to be actually where Robert Smalls and his family are laid to rest, at the Tabernacle Baptist Church, and where you will also see the iconic memorial bust of Robert Smalls. Very historic site.
definitely. I bet it also has like a kind of sacred feeling to it when you visit it, like just reverent and
It really
beautiful.
does. It really does. That whole area, Robert Smalls and his family started to buy and purchase lots of property in that block of where the Tabernacle Baptist Church is. An entire block they purchased. And also, he also cared for his former enslaver, the wife of his former enslaver, Mrs. McKee. After the Civil War, she had fled when the Union forces came through, but after the Civil War, she returned to the house thinking it was still hers. And the story goes that Robert Smalls welcomed her into the home and cared for her. She was suffering from some mental health issues, and he cared for her until her death. Can you imagine the compassion that you have
Yeah.
to
I was
bring
just
in
going to
some?
say
Yeah,
that's some serious compassion and kindness and forgiveness. That is an
absolutely.
incredible man.
That is an incredible man. And so we also have the Grand Army Hall. The Grand Army Hall of the Republic Meeting Hall it's called the Grand Army of the Republic Meeting Hall. And it was built around 1896 by an African American Civil War veteran. And as a chapter of the Grand Army of the Republic, this is a national organization, and it is reported to be one of the only two surviving Grand Army Republic halls in the country. And this is going to be on one of the historic streets here in Beaufort. Another important site is the National Cemetery. Our national cemetery, yes, it is very sacred. Yes, there are many people that have been laid to rest there, but it's also beautiful at the same time. You see these very stately live oaks dripping and draped with our Spanish moss. It's just beautifully laid out. And when you step onto those sacred grounds, you really feel a presence. And some people say that they can feel, some of the formerly enslaved people that served in the Civil War. You can feel their presence, which could feel a little, eerie. Um,
Yeah.
and so the National Cemetery was created by an act of Congress in 1863. President Lincoln decided that he needed to have one here in Beaufort because there were so many people that perished in the war. And they needed to have Beaufort serve as that national site. And the building you can see surrounding the National Cemetery are bricks. Very, very old bricks. That are going to be made by formerly enslaved people, and it's very stately, has a very stately presence. And it's beautifully landscaped, as I said, and also had become a destination during this Reconstruction parades for people to come and celebrate and memorialize the people that have passed. So that's in Beaufort. There's more, but I can't touch on all of them. Um, there's Port Royal, which is here in the Beaufort area, and I mentioned Camp
Right.
Saxton. In Port Royal, there's Camp Saxton, and this is going to be the former John Joyner Smith plantation. And it also currently where the Naval Hospital is. And this is going to be the site of numerous Civil War encampments, the training for the U.S. colored troops. And as I said earlier, the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation took there January 1, 1863. And then also, there was a Freedman's Church called the Free Church of Port Royal. Now it's called the Union Church. And I believe that it's called the Union Church is because the Union occupied this area greatly. And it was built in
Mhm.
1878. And it's still an existing congregation that worships there. I'm going to move on to St. Helena Island, my home, where I'm from, still here in Beaufort. And
Perfect.
one of the places that's really important, well, one of the things actually that I need to say is that St. Helena Island was home to about 51 to 55 plantations during the enslavement era. Now we call them communities. We still know the historical significance that they were former plantations, and the communities still embody the same geographical lines, boundaries that the plantation had during that time period. And so one of the plantations is called the Oaks Plantation. And it was built in 1861, well, rebuilt in 1861, and this is going to be where the founder of Penn School, Laura Town, where she would have her first schoolroom. And this is going to be where in the area in which she lived
Okay.
at the Oaks. And so we'll get into the Penn School very quickly, very quickly.
I'm excited.
And then also, go ahead.
I'm excited. I just love hearing all about this.
I'm, s- I'm so sorry. I can go on and on
You're
and on and
just
on
fine.
and on and on.
I'm loving all of
And
this.
so and also on St. Helena Island is Brick Baptist Church. It's a beautiful brick, stately building. It was built in 1855, just before the Civil War, not too long. And this congregation was a white congregation. But one of the amazing things about this church is that upstairs in the balcony, they allowed the enslaved population to come and worship, but they had to go upstairs, out of sight, out of mind, hidden. And so you see this historical area upstairs, and it's very narrow, and there was only room for the Black congregation to stand upstairs. And this is going to be the second school site for Penn School. So from 1862 to 1865, Brick Baptist Church served as the second school site for Penn School. This was possible because the white congregation had abandoned the church during the Union occupation here. And then this is when the Baptist Church of Beaufort would allow the Black congregation to worship there. And so from 1862 to 1865, it was possible for the freedmen of St. Helena Island to go to school under the leadership, of course, of Laura Town and Ellen Murray. So now we get to Penn School. Are you
I'm so
excited?
excited. I'm like bouncing in my seat. I'm just like over here giddy as a little school kid.
I am as well. Penn School is so very important to me personally, to many people, but to me personally, because this is where my father went to school and graduated in 1943. But I'm going to back up to the founding. Of course, Laura Town and Ellen Murray started a classroom at the Oaks Plantation House, and they started off with 9 scholars. And they used that word scholars intentionally, not students, scholars. They wanted to empower their students to rise to that occasion, that level of
I
education.
love
And
that.
in their writings, isn't that amazing?
So amazing.
So we're able to get all of this information from the letters and diary of Laura Town, and then also from Charlotte Fortin. So we take off the word, oh, that word I don't like, slave.
Hmm.
Then we take on the word contraband. Then we take on the word freedman, which is the word that we're using about in 1862 when Penn School is founded. And then if you're going to school at Penn School, you're being called a scholar. And so Penn School helped many African Americans gain self-respect, self-reliance, and integrate into freed society. And the faculty, Laura Town and Ellen Murray, and just 6 months later, Charlotte Fortin, provided not only educational support, but other support like medical care, even social services, and employment assistance. And if you were going to Penn School at this time, you're learning academic education. So those 9 scholars grew to maybe 18 and 30, and soon they were forced out of the plantation house because the class size was growing. And so they moved into the Brick Baptist Church, and they were there till 1865. This is going to be where Charlotte Fortin teaches, that our first Black teacher is coming to teach. During that time span, it was crucial for the teachers to make sure students were going to be taught not only academic education but spiritual education. They're in a former house of worship, so that is only fitting. Also, the school class size grew and grew and grew. They grew to 80 at the time they went into Brick Baptist Church for the school. Then it grew to 100 and so on, and just growing and growing. And so Laura Town and Ellen Murray petitioned the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania Freedmen's Aid Societies to fund a schoolhouse. And so the first schoolhouse was shipped down from the north, brought down the Atlantic coastal waterway to St. Helena Island, put on the grounds in which Penn Center exists today. And all of this was made possible by Hastings Gant. He was able to donate and sell the 50 acres of land, which made it possible for that schoolhouse to be placed, thus educating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that were newly freed.
That's an amazing
And
legacy to leave.
it is amazing. And today it's a National Historic Landmark District. It speaks to its founding during the Civil War, the Reconstruction era history. It even moves into the civil rights history, bringing in civil rights leaders like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conferences held there in the 1960s. And it's in existence today. It has a 158-year history. And Penn School is now known as Penn Center National Historic Landmark District. And it is very important within the Reconstruction era history because of when it was founded, who founded it, Hastings Gant, who supplied the land to make it all possible. The founders of the school are very important. Laura Town and Ellen Murray, no doubt. Hastings Gant is vital to this equation because the land is what is making it possible for a 158-year legacy. So, do you have any questions about Penn School?
Oh man, there's so much there that I'm just in awe, and like how many people had to come together just perfectly to be able to create this awesome legacy.
Yeah,
It's
it
amazing.
is. It was
Um,
definitely collaborative of the newly freed, abolitionists,
mhm.
missionaries, people that were about the true Reconstruction period.
I'm like so can't even speak because I'm just like, wow. And like the fact that it's been through everything, and then even the civil rights movement
Yeah,
in the 60s with, like you said, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
yeah,
That's incredible. Like, what a rich history. And I'm sure like such a strong and important piece of history for especially like African American culture,
yeah.
because that's something you get there isn't a lot of always, or it's not taught about in history as well as it should be. So I'm taking it in right
I
now,
understand.
like
I
absorbing
understand.
it.
Yeah, because there's so much happening, Like I said, it's going to be how's the United States government and America as a whole, how are they going to tackle the integration of newly freed people in every portion of society, political, economical, labor systems, and educational. And so Penn School is going to be really involved in all of that. They're going to be involved with not only education, but they bring on industrial trades and arts teachings in the early, like 1901, so that when you graduated from the school, you could also have a trade. They also taught land ownership. And with those three things, with a proper academic education that was highly competitive, they could go anywhere in America
Oh yeah.
and be competitive, along with an industrial trade, for example, being a carpenter, being a cobbler, making shoes, being a blacksmith, being a midwife and catching babies, being maybe a teacher, and then also land ownership, how you purchase land, how do you keep your land productive, profitable, and keep it for your heirs in the future. With those three things, the Penn School founders felt that you would be truly free in America with those three things. And they succeeded. My family still owns the land that we purchased in the late 1860s. My father graduated from Penn School. I am not the only one that has benefited still from the founders, from Hastings Gant, from the education that was provided at Penn School during the time span of Reconstruction, through the civil rights, and even through today. There are many people that can state that Penn School has made a significant impact on their lives because of their ancestors attending that school.
I would definitely have to agree, just like hearing how close that is to your own personal family and everything. That's amazing. So I know it's still a place that people can go and visit, and I would, after hearing this, highly recommend that being a place people should definitely visit when they come to Beaufort. I'm sure it has a lot of the history elements. Is there anything else people can learn while they're there visiting?
Absolutely. So there's a museum there, the York W. Bailey Museum. But what is also there, the Reconstruction era National Historic Park. And initially, it started off with four sites, part of the Reconstruction National Monument. Now it has been redesignated to a higher station of historic park. And on Penn Center's campus, you'll find Dara Hall. And this is Penn School's oldest building, existing building on the Penn School historic grounds. And This is going to be where students and community members could come and to go to school, have meetings, different things taking place there. This is going to be also a gymnasium during Penn School's history where temperance meetings were held and many other community meetings. It had to be rebuilt in 1903, but it was first built in the late 1800s. And it's going to be the site where the National Park Service is reinterpreting some of the Reconstruction era history here in our area and across the nation. But National Park Service has a lot of sites that they are going to be incorporating within this historic park. One of those actually could be maybe even a prayer house. St. Helena Island is home to several prayer houses, and prayer houses are places where enslaved populations on a plantation could go to worship. But it was also a place where they could go and build their own sense of community, their own sense of kinship when those kinship relationships have been stripped away. So the prayer house is not only going to be a place of worship, but it's also going to be a place to build community, to build kinship, a place where you can go to find family, to also serve as a courthouse, to work out issues within your community, your immediate community. It's going to span the Civil War. Well, before the Civil War, the prayer houses are going to be built during enslavement. It's going to be very important during the Civil War, during Reconstruction, during the Civil Rights Movement, and into the early 1990s. Prayer houses really are a vital part of most Gullah Geechee communities throughout the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor.
That is amazing. I think that that's probably about all we have time for
All
today.
we can
But
do.
yeah, but do you
I
have
know.
any
That's
last
good.
comments or things you want to share with
Wow.
everyone?
Just one last thing I just wanted to share is that the Reconstruction era is a significant historical time span. And the things, the events, the people, the places here in Beaufort are vital to telling that story, talking about the experimentation that took here, the transformation that took here, the hope that was established, disappointments that happened, but also accomplishments. So this time span here in this area is vital to the full telling of the story of our experiences as enslaved, freed people, and who we are today.
Thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciated getting to talk with you and to learn more about just this rich history that South Carolina has, and in Beaufort specifically. I'm sure that our listeners will appreciate it too, but this was very beautiful. So thank you so much for being on with us, Victoria.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for joining us. And don't forget to subscribe and like and leave a comment. This has been another episode of the Intercoastal Podcast, part of the Destination Marketing Podcast Network, hosted by Natasha Lye and produced by the Relic team.